My name is Kasif. I'm 45 years old, and what I'm about to share with you isn't a rumor or a tale I heard from someone else. This is something I saw with my own eyes, something I still struggle to explain. Even now, I've lived most of my life in a quiet rural corner of the country, a place where people keep to themselves, and the forest is older than all of us put together. Out here, stories are born from things we've seen, not invented to impress strangers. This story begins with an old friend of mine, a man named Raymond Hale. He was in his 70s when he passed, and to most people, he was just another quiet old man who lived by the woods. But Mr. Hale had a secret, a bond with something most people don't believe exists, a creature known in whispers as Bigfoot. What happened after Mr. Hale died wasn't something I could have imagined, and if I hadn't stood there watching it happen myself, I would have never believed that even a creature that size could feel what we feel, but it did, and what came next was unforgettable. Let me know when you're ready for the next section. His name was Raymond Hale. To most people in town, he was just old Ray, the quiet widower who kept mostly to himself, living alone in a creaky wooden cabin on the edge of the forest. My name is Kasif. I'm 45 years old, and for the past 10 years, Mr. Hale was more than a neighbor to me. He was a friend, almost like a grandfather I never had. He lived a simple life. No television, no phone ringing off the hook. He cooked on a wood stove, collected rainwater, and still mended his own clothes by hand. He wasn't the type to show off or talk much, but you always felt welcome in his presence. His silence wasn't cold, it was peaceful. Raymond had lost his wife a long time ago. He never had children and never remarried. Instead of turning bitter or lonely, he quietly put all the love he had left into the world around him. He fed stray dogs. He left corn out for the deer in winter. And more times than I can count, I saw him stop what he was doing just to help an injured bird or baby raccoon. He never asked for thanks. He just did what he felt was right. And that was enough for him. But there was something else about Mr. Hale. Something even I didn't know until after he passed. There was a reason he never moved away from that forest. A reason he always looked into those trees, as if he was watching for someone, or something. It wasn't until the day he told me his last secret that I understood who he really was. Raymond Hale didn't just help the people and animals most of us see every day. He had also helped something most people don't even believe exists, a creature larger, older, and more mysterious than anything found in books or museums, and the bond between them was real. I didn't know it then, but one day, I would see the proof with my own eyes at Raymond's grave, long after he was gone. It was about 2 weeks before Mr. Hale passed away when he finally told me the truth, a truth he'd been carrying alone for nearly 40 years. We were sitting on his back porch, watching the sun dip behind the tree line. He looked weaker than usual. His hands shook a little as he poured tea into my cup, and then, out of nowhere, he said, "Kasif, there's something I need to tell you before I go. Something I've never told another soul." He told me that one winter, decades ago, he had come across something deep in the forest, something he thought at first was a bear cub. But as he got closer, he realized it was no bear, it was a young Bigfoot. Injured, scared, and barely able to stand. Its leg had been caught in an old metal trap, the kind meant for wolves, not creatures standing nearly 6 feet tall even as juveniles. Raymond said the creature didn't lash out or try to attack him. Instead, it just looked at him, eyes full of pain, and somehow trust he could have run. But instead, he did something few men would have dared. He freed it. He took his coat off and wrapped it around the injured limb. Then he slowly backed away, watched it limp off into the trees, leaving bloody tracks in the snow. He thought it would die, but 2 nights later it came back, and that was the beginning of a bond that would change his life, and in time mine. Raymond didn't just help it once. He started leaving food on the stump near the tree line. He'd leave fresh bandages, scraps of deer meat, even warm water on freezing nights. And slowly over the years, the creature grew. Taller, stronger, more cautious, but yet always gentle with him. They never spoke a word, not in any way we understand. But Raymond said something deeper passed between them. Something built on time, consistency, and quiet care. "It trusted me," he said, voice low and worn. More than most people ever have. He never told anyone. Didn't even write it down. He knew if the wrong people found out, it would turn into a hunt, a spectacle. So he kept it a secret even as he grew older. And just before he passed, he looked into my eyes and said, "If anything ever happens, you'll know. Because it won't forget." At the time, I didn't know what he meant, but I would soon. Raymond Hale passed away quietly in his sleep just a few days after he told me his secret. There were no hospital machines, no ambulance lights in the night. His heart simply gave out, the way old hearts do when they've finally given everything they had. I was there that morning when we found him. Still in his old armchair, his glasses resting in his lap, a book open beside him. The room felt peaceful, like he had slipped away without a single fear in his mind. There weren't many people at his funeral. Just a few neighbors, a distant cousin, and me. Most people didn't know him well enough to show up. But for those of us who did, it felt like we were saying goodbye to one of the last honest souls left in the world. He was buried just beyond his cabin, on a little rise near the forest's edge, a place he'd chosen himself. It overlooked the trees he loved so much. He said once that it was where he felt closest to everything he cared about, both seen and unseen. I stood there in the cold air, holding a small wooden cross I'd carved for him. It wasn't fancy, just his name and the years he lived. But it felt right, simple, honest, like him. As the others walked away, I stayed behind a while longer. I didn't know why, but something told me to wait. The wind was still. The woods were quiet. But I didn't feel alone. Maybe it was just grief. Or maybe it was something watching. For the next few nights, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only one mourning him, that somewhere, deep in those trees, a presence had felt the loss too. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know if any of the stories he told me were real. But I promised myself I'd go back, not just out of obligation, but out of respect. For the man he was, and for whatever secret he died protecting. I had no idea just how real and how powerful that secret truly was. It wasn't long before I found out. And what I saw still keeps me awake some nights thinking about what love looks like, even when it comes from something not quite human. It was 3 nights after we buried Mr. Hale when I went back to his grave. I didn't plan on staying long, just wanted to make sure the cross was standing straight and that the earth hadn't been disturbed by animals. But as soon as I reached that clearing, I felt it, the kind of stillness that makes the hair stand on the back of your neck. The woods were quiet, too quiet. Not a single bird, not even the hum of insects. And then I heard it, a sound I'd never heard before. Slow, heavy footsteps, not rushed, not sneaking, just deliberate. They were coming from the tree line behind the grave. At first I couldn't see anything, just darkness between the pines. But then it stepped out, massive, covered in thick dark fur, shoulders broader than any animal I'd ever seen, 8 feet tall at least. And it walked upright. It didn't look at me. It wasn't there for me. It stood over the grave, silent, still. Its head bowed slightly as if it understood exactly what that mound of earth meant. Then, slowly, it reached into a pouch made of woven grass and placed something beside the headstone, a small bundle of wildflowers, tied with a strip of bark. No growl. No threat, just grief. My breath caught in my throat. I took a single step back and a twig snapped beneath my shoe. The creature turned, its eyes meeting mine. They weren't wild. They weren't angry, they were sad, and in that moment I understood it. This wasn't a beast, it was a mourner. I didn't run. I couldn't. I watched silently as it turned back toward the forest, stepping slowly, almost reluctantly, back into the mist. And that night, everything Mr. Hale told me became real. I didn't sleep much after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that massive figure kneeling beside a simple grave, mourning like any one of us would. It wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was something else. Something like, 2 days later, I went back again, this time just before dusk. I didn't want to catch it off guard, but I also couldn't ignore what I'd seen. I stood behind a tree not far from the grave, hidden, just waiting. The forest was still. Not silent, but peaceful. Like it was holding its breath along with me, and then it came. Same shape, same slow, heavy steps, the same quiet dignity. It moved gently, almost respectfully, like someone visiting a loved one's resting place. In its hands this time was a small, round loaf of bread, not something found in the woods. It had taken it from somewhere, Maybe from a cabin. Maybe from a farmer's field. But it wasn't stealing. It was offering. Just like Raymond had offered food all those years. It placed the bread by the flowers next to the cross I'd carved. Then with both hands it wiped the dirt from the grave marker, carefully, tenderly, like someone taking care of a memory that mattered more than words. I realized then, it wasn't just visiting, it was honoring a bond. I don't know how long I watched, long enough to feel my heart break a little, seeing something so wild act with such human loyalty. And then, just as before, it turned and walked back into the trees without a sound. It didn't know I was there. But I knew something now. Some bonds don't end with death. They only get quieter. A week passed before I saw it again. I'd visited the grave every other day, bringing small things Mr. Hale used to like. A fresh sunflower, a smooth stone he once kept on his desk. But the creature didn't return during those visits. Then one evening, just as the last light was fading behind the trees, I felt something. A presence, a shift in the air. I wasn't afraid. I just knew I wasn't alone. This time I didn't hide. I stood beside the grave, hands clasped in front of me, looking out toward the tree line, and then it stepped out. The Bigfoot was even more imposing up close, but there was no anger in its stance. Its eyes weren't wild. They were tired and familiar. Eyes that had seen Mr. Hale grow old. Eyes that remembered every kindness he'd given. It didn't look at the grave first. It looked at me. And in that still moment between us, something passed. Not in words, not in gestures, but in the space where understanding lives. I nodded once, slow and steady. It watched me, cautious but calm. "He's gone," I whispered. "But he knew you cared." "I know that now." The creature blinked. Then, in a motion so gentle it felt intentional, it placed one massive hand over its heart, then lowered it, almost like a bow. Then it turned and faced the grave. It didn't bring food or flowers this time. It brought silence, the kind you give when words aren't enough. I took a small step closer. My chest was tight, not with fear, but with something that felt like witnessing the end of a promise kept. And then, it looked back at me once more. A final glance. No threat, no fear. Just acknowledgement. It turned and walked into the woods for the last time, shoulders heavy, head low. I didn't try to follow. I just stood there in the fading light, watching it disappear into the mist, knowing, one without question, that some love stories don't begin with words, and don't end at graves. Some just live on in silence. I went back to the grave a few weeks later. The weather had begun to change. The air carried the first hint of winter, and the leaves had turned the kind of gold that only comes before they fall. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Maybe nothing at all. Maybe the woods had closed the chapter the way nature always does, quietly and without ceremony. But when I reached the grave, I stopped in my tracks. The bread was gone, of course. The flowers had wilted, but sitting there leaned against the wooden cross was a small, smooth stone, one I had never seen before. Polished from years in the river, shaped just enough to fit in a palm, etched, barely visible, was a mark like a sunburst. It wasn't mine, it wasn't human, it was a final gift. A reminder, a message that even in silence, connection continues. I stood there for a long time, looking down at that stone, and realized something that changed the way I saw everything after that. We like to think that we're the only ones who grieve, the only ones who remember, the only ones who love, but the truth is, the world is full of quiet hearts, hearts we never hear, hearts we never consider, hearts we never see, until they're standing in front of us, mourning someone we thought we knew alone. Mr. Hale didn't just leave behind a story, he left behind a legacy, one made not of words, but of kindness. And in the end, even the wild knew how to say goodbye. Some bonds don't break, some stories don't fade, some love never really dies.